Good morning, gentlemen. It's early morning. The sun has not yet risen, but I thought I should talk to you on a topic of great importance as far as the world is concerned and also India. I'm going to talk about the Islamization of Europe. Now, at the moment, it may look very preposterous that I'll talk on such a topic because Europe is the cradle of the Catholic religion. Most of the countries are Catholic, the French, the Italians, the Germans, and the Pope. He is the main head of the Catholic faith and he sits in the Vatican. That is part of Italy. So, gentlemen, it is the only place where the Catholics are in some force and they believe in their faith because it is the center of the Catholic faith. But there have been some other developments now, and one of these concerns, first of all, the birth rate. Now, I must touch on this aspect because for any population to survive, it must have a birth rate of at least 2.1. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, in Europe, the birth rate has gone well below that. And in some countries, it is hovering around 1, with the result that Europe has got a declining population in the sense that more and more people who are becoming part of the European Union are older people because the longevity has gone up, the new births are not coming forward, are not there, and it's an aging population. So, in such circumstances, you can well imagine what is the end result. The end result is that you do not have people who can do the jobs available. That is, you need the younger crowd to do the jobs, and in particular the menial jobs. Now, the younger generation in Europe doesn't want to do the menial jobs, so there had to be some method, and the Europeans thought they were very clever. Of course, during the days of the empires, many Europeans considered like France to be the mother country, and many Africans from Morocco, Libya, Algeria, they went and settled there. It was open, and nobody at that time realized that this thing could become a Frankenstein. Even after the empires broke up, the Europeans were accepting guest workers, like guest workers. Germany was taking in guest workers from Turkey. Turkey is an Islamic state. And these men came in, and now they are numbering millions. But Islam, as many scholars have pointed out, is an insular faith, and men who follow the Islamic faith first believe in Islam and then in their country. Like if you are in France, you will first believe in Islam and France comes second, it goes for the other places. Now, these people have not assimilated with the culture of the West, of the Europeans, and their faith is alien. They wish to practice that faith in Europe, and they wish to have their own laws, and they feel they are discriminated against, and net result is a cauldron, which we just saw what's happening in France now. There was mass scale rioting which was ignited by one small incident when a young French boy was shot dead by the police for violating a traffic post. I mean, this is a small incident, but then there was always an undercurrent of violence all around, and the net result was it erupted. like the volcano, uh, how Mount Etna exploded and Pompeii was destroyed. Well, it's something like that. And there was a time when almost 30 French cities were under curfew, and the French could not understand what's happening. Even earlier, there has been violent actions in Belgium, Denmark, and other places when some cartoons were published on the founder of Islam, and the revenge was accordingly taken. I won't say it's right or wrong. I'm just stating a fact that this is what is happening in Europe. Even now, let's take Sweden. For example, they have a very sizable Muslim minority, and they are not integrating with the Swedish ethos and culture. And there are places in Sweden where these migrants are staying, where even the police are scared to go. Now, gentlemen, all this is pointing to one thing, and that is that the Muslims are assertive in Europe, number one. Number two, they are growing in numbers, and I have already told you the birth rate. This is the crucial thing which matters. The birth rate of the Europeans is going low, while those of the migrants, that the Muslims, is very high. And there has to be an increase in population. Another thing is, 2 world wars have seen the decimation of the French, German, Italian men. With the result, I think Europe has an imbalance, that includes Russia, of more women than men. And I do not know what are the reasons. Maybe it's because of economic prosperity or anything, but the younger people are not producing enough children to sustain the population. And I will draw your attention to a video which I saw some time back. I don't know whether it's still there on YouTube or no, where the Imam of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in a sermon had told his followers that it is your duty to go and fertilize the European woman. No, it's a fact. Because the birth rate is below 2.1, and as I just told you, some of the European nations' birth rate is hovering around 1. That is, there's going to be a sharp decline of the population, of the younger population, and the older ones are remaining. That is the reason, Italy had handed over their entire production of their products to China. They used to get their items from China because they didn't have enough of workers, younger crowd, to sit and run the factories in Italy. Now there is another move on. I think a quid pro quo is being worked out. Turkey, which is an Islamic nation, a Sunni nation, has decided to drop its objections to Sweden to join the European Union, and in turn, I believe they say, you give us the membership of the EU. And that's a very crucial point. If you look at history, all the invasions of Europe have come through Turkey. Turkey at one stage occupied not only the whole of Central Arab lands, that is Mesopotamia, but they were also occupying vast areas of Eastern Europe. And they are responsible for almost 1 million men being massacred, a genocide in Armenia. The people killed were the Christians. You can't forget that. Even the Pope has condemned it as a genocide. Well, gentlemen, now if this country becomes a member of the EU, it will be adding 70 million Muslims inside this union, and the net result will be a complete imbalance of population, because in the EU, if it's one country, you can go and settle anywhere. Go in Warsaw, you can go anywhere, and these Turks will then spread out. Economically, they are not on par with the Western European countries. their per capita is much lower, and they would be looking for better pastures because that is the basis of migration. Because Islam looks on two things very favorably, that is migration and marriage as a source of increasing the faith all over the world. And no wonder the Pew Research Institute has said that by 2050, Islam would be the number one religion, number-wise, in the world. Gentlemen, Europe thus faces a very great threat, and so many European politicians like Marine Pen have said that Europe is heading for Islamization. So much of Islamophobia has been created that two countries, I think it's Hungary and Poland, have decided not to allow any migrants to come to their countries. That's very fine, but what about the migrants who are already there? And there are thousands and hundreds which are trying to get into Europe somehow or the other. And if Turkey is a member, then there is no end to it. And the thing which is going to take 100 years will be done in 25 years. I have a feeling that it will not be a roller coaster ride for Turkey to enter the EU, and perhaps the European nations won't allow it. But whether you allow it or no, the Muslim population in Europe is continuing to grow, and it's going to grow even more because their birth rate hovers around 4, while the European birth rate is 1 of the Christians, and then as a result, you know what's going to happen, an imbalance. And there could be mass-scale rioting like what we have seen in France. Europeans have still not learnt anything. Now, I will tell you, it's so very silly that recently the European Parliament was sitting and debating about Manipur, which is a small state in India which had some violence. But they didn't sit and discuss the violence in France, where 32 cities were under curfew. They didn't discuss that. They didn't discuss so many things. They don't discuss about the operation in Tibet. I don't recollect them passing any resolutions against China on that. But against India, they were going and sitting and passing all these resolutions and all that. And of course, they got a very befitting reply from the Indian government because it's an internal matter and the EU Parliament cannot interfere in it. Gentlemen, adding fuel to the fire is the Ukraine conflict which America had started. And like, the Pied Piper of Hamelin, that famous nursery rhyme where all the children finally began to follow the Pied Piper and he led them away. Joe Biden is in the same mold. He's blowing his pipe and he's taking the entire European flock with him for the battle in Ukraine, which is actually a very small point. I mean, Europe has got bigger problems than to keep fighting for Ukraine and trying to antagonize Russia. Russia is part of the same Catholic faith. I couldn't understand what is the problem, but Russia has always been treated as an enemy, and this was something which Bill Clinton launched, and they expanded NATO to surround Russia, with the result now every country in Europe is a member of NATO, and they are more concerned with Russia than the cancer which is growing inside the minorities who are rioting, creating problems. There is insecurity in life, and of course there is an imbalance of the sexes as well as the age factor. An aging population. Historically, you know that an aging population cannot sustain itself and they will require labor. And from where are the Europeans going to get the labor in the time to come? Because these migrants who are already there now have got aspirations, they want to be rich, they want to live like the white men. which the Europeans will not allow, and the net result is going to be a cauldron, an explosion. Gentlemen, Europe has to be very careful now. The days of hegemony, the empires is over. And they better realize that it was better for them to have a detente with Russia than to toe the American line like the Pied Piper of Hamelin. I mean, one's got to be very careful, very circumspect when you look into all these things, because history is nobody's friend, and history is the record, a chronicle, and history is also a cycle. And the cycle, the way I look into it, is that there are certain things which are moving forward inexorably that are going to bring Europe to doom. Ukraine war and the minority in the continent. This minority is going to destroy Europe, because they have no sense of loyalty to the country in which they are staying. Gentlemen, Europe is on the throes of death. It's very sad that you state that, because also I must mention that the last two world wars, the epicenter was Europe, and this time also it will be the same. Only thing this time, it will be a nuclear conflagration. Americans, of course, sitting far away. Biden and company are fueling the fire. He's just thinking, I should score some brownie points to become the president again, win in 2024. That's his entire aim. But Europe has graver things, and they must guard against the fact that it doesn't become an Islamic state. And in case Turkey is admitted, what is inevitable 50 or 75 years down the line will happen within a decade and a half. So Europe should be more worried about that than the Ukraine war and other things. It's best to disengage with Russia and look how you can set your house in order. Well, gentlemen, I think I will close now, and I hope you like this video. Share it with your friends and come back for more. I will close now and say, Jai Hind, glory to India, God bless and take care.